The median bank account balance in America is $8,000, not 80,000, 8. If you have more than that sitting in your checking or savings account right now, you are statistically wealthier than half the country. Let that sink in for a second. Half of all American households have less than 8 grand to their name in liquid savings. And yet, you know what's wild? The economy is supposedly doing great. The stock market hit record highs in 2025. Unemployment is low, inflation has cooled off, and yet, if you're watching this video, there's a decent chance you feel like you're drowning financially. You're not crazy. The numbers tell a story that the headlines don't. I'm Nick, and I've spent the last few months digging through Federal Reserve data, consumer finance reports, and surveys that paint a picture of American wealth that will probably shock you. Because while the headlines scream about economic growth and rising wages, the numbers beneath the surface tell a completely different story. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the average American's bank account in 2026, and more importantly, where you stand in all of this. Here's the stat that should make your stomach drop. 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now, 2/3 of the country. And before you assume this is just minimum wage workers struggling to get by, think again. This includes people making 6 figures, lawyers, engineers, mid-level managers, all trapped in the same cycle. They get paid, the money evaporates into rent or mortgage, car payments, groceries that somehow cost double what they did 4 years ago, and by the time the next paycheck rolls around, they're at zero again. It's not a poverty problem, it's a structural trap that's swallowing the middle class whole. But it gets darker. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans, 24% to be exact, have literally zero emergency savings. Nothing. Not a rainy day fund, not a cushion, nothing between them and financial catastrophe. If the car breaks down, if they get sick, if the water heater explodes, they're immediately in crisis mode. And it's not because they're reckless, it's because there's nothing left over to save after covering the basics. Meanwhile, 54% of households have no dedicated retirement savings at all. None. They're not planning for the future because they can't afford to survive the present. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Inflation. You've probably heard that inflation has come down, that things are getting better. Technically, that's true. The rate of increase has slowed. But here's what they don't tell you. The damage is already done. Prices for goods and services are roughly 25% higher today than they were in 2020. A 25% markup on everything. Your grocery bill, your insurance, your rent, all of it is a quarter more expensive than it was just a few years ago. And wages? They didn't jump 25%. Most people got maybe a 10% raise if they were lucky. The gap between what things cost and what people earn has widened into a chasm, and nobody's building a bridge. The vibe is off, and people know it. 32% of Americans expect their personal finances to get worse in 2026. That's the highest level of financial pessimism recorded since 2018. Think about that. Despite all the good news on paper, 1/3 of the country is looking at the year ahead and thinking, I'm about to get crushed. They're not wrong. The split-screen economy is real. If you own assets, stocks, real estate, you probably had a great 2025. Your net worth went up on paper. But if you live off wages alone, if you're trading your time for a paycheck and trying to make it stretch, you're statistically likely to be falling further behind. And here's the kicker. Americans were asked what they'd need to feel wealthy in 2026. The number they came up with? They get $2.5 million in net worth. That's not retire and never work again. That's just feel wealthy money. The number people say they need to retire comfortably has hit $1.26 million. Let that sink in. The average person believes they need over $1 million saved just to stop working without panicking. And yet, as we're about to see, the actual retirement savings of most Americans is nowhere close to that, not even in the same galaxy. So where do you actually stand? Because here's the thing, averages lie. When you hear that the average American has $91,000 saved to retirement at age 40, that sounds decent, right? But that number is skewed by the people at the top. The guy with $2 million saved drags the average up, making everyone else look better than they are. What you actually want to know is the median, the point where half the people are above and half are below, the real middle. Let's break it down by age, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. If you're under 25, the median retirement savings is about $2,800. That's not a typo. $2,800. For people aged 25 to 34, it jumps to around $15,000. Still not enough to retire on, obviously, but it's a start. By 35 to 44, the median hits about $35,500. Now, if you're 40 years old and you've got $40,000 saved, you might look at the average of $91,000 and feel like you're way behind. But you're not. You're actually ahead of the median American. You're doing better than half the country. Things get slightly better as people age. The 45 to 54 crowd has a median of about $61,500 saved. People aged 55 to 64, the ones staring retirement in the face, have a median of $87,500. And let me be clear, okay? $88,000 is not enough to retire on. If you're pulling 4% a year, that's $3,500 annually. That's $291 a month. You can't live on that. Social Security helps, sure, but an average Social Security check is only about $1,900 a month. Add that to your savings drawdown, and you're looking at maybe $2,200 a month to live on. That's tight, really tight. Now let's talk about debt, because savings are only half the equation. Debt is the anchor dragging everyone down, and it's distributed unevenly across generations. Gen Z, the youngest adults aged 18 to 28, have an average debt load of about $34,000. That sounds manageable until you realize it's mostly student loans and car payments, and they're just starting their careers. Millennials aged 29 to 44 are carrying an average of $132,000 in debt. Mortgages are the big driver here, but also student loans that never seem to go away, and credit cards filling the gap between income and expenses. But the real debt champions, Gen X, people aged 45 to 60, are carrying an average of $158,000 in debt, the highest of any generation. They're the sandwich generation, paying for their kids' college while also helping their aging parents, all while trying to save for their own retirement that's rapidly approaching. They're getting squeezed from both ends, and the numbers prove it. Baby boomers, aged 61 to 79, have an average debt of about $92,000, lower than Gen X, but still significant, especially for people who should theoretically be winding down. Many are still paying off mortgages or helping family members financially, and it's eating into whatever retirement cushion they manage to build. And then there's credit card debt, the trap that never stops taking. The average credit card balance for people who carry debt is nearly $7,000. But here's the stat that should terrify you. 46% of credit card holders do not pay off their bill in full every month. Nearly half the country is paying 20% interest or more on their balances. That's not debt. That's a tax on being broke. If you're carrying a $7,000 balance at 22% interest and only making minimum payments of $140 a month, you'll be paying that off for years while the bank collects thousands in interest. It's designed to keep you stuck. So how do you compare? Are you ahead of the median or behind? Are you part of the 67% living paycheck to paycheck? Or have you managed to carve out some breathing room? The answer matters, because understanding where you stand is the first step to changing it. And there's more to unpack here, because the numbers get even more revealing when you zoom in on the financial behaviors and choices people are making right now. Let's dig into what people are actually doing with their money right now, because the behavior patterns reveal something fascinating. It's not just about how much you have, it's about the choices being made under financial pressure. And those choices are creating a cascade effect that's making everything worse. First, the savings rate. Americans are currently saving about 3.5%. That's pathetically low. Historically, Americans saved closer to 8 or 9%. During the pandemic, when stimulus checks hit and people couldn't spend on travel or restaurants, the savings rates briefly spiked to over 30%. But now we're back to barely saving anything. That 3.5% tells you everything you need to know. People aren't choosing to save less, they can't afford to save more. Every dollar is already allocated before it hits the bank account. Housing is the other massive pressure point that's squeezing people from both sides. If you're renting, you're getting destroyed. Nearly 50% of renters in 2025 reported difficulty paying their monthly rent, not struggling to save for a down payment, struggling to make rent at all. And if you're a homeowner, you might own your house, but you're probably locked in by your mortgage rate. If you bought when rates were 3%, you can't move now because selling means financing a new place at 7%. You're trapped. Your house isn't an asset you can leverage, it's a golden cage. The wealth gap isn't just widening, it's becoming a chasm. The people who own assets, who bought homes before prices exploded, who have retirement accounts invested in the market, those people are doing fine, better than fine. Their net worth grew significantly in 2025. But if you don't own assets, if you're starting from zero trying to get a foothold, you're running uphill into a hurricane. The starting line keeps moving further away. Here's what really gets me. The benchmark numbers we talked about earlier, those medians for retirement savings, those debt averages, those aren't aspirational goals. Those are survival metrics, and half the country isn't even hitting them. If you're 45 years old with $50,000 saved for retirement,